Hi, what I'd like to talk to you about today is how ABB is combating climate change. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the kind of problem that climate change is. So when we talk about climate change, I like to talk about it in the context of being a wicked problem. Now you may have heard this terminology before or more recently used in the design world as problems to solve that are very difficult, that are very challenging for a number of reasons. The terminology actually was developed in the 1970s in the social sciences. And really, when we talk about wicked problems, we're talking about problems where there's conflict, not only over the solution, but over the actual problem we're trying to solve. So it's a really challenging problem, right? So you can think about things like climate change. You can think about things like pandemic response. You can think about things like healthcare. And most personally to almost everybody in this room, you can think about your own life. Our own lives are wicked problems or wicked problems to solve. So what are the characteristics, again, of wicked problems? So the first thing is conflict over the problem and solution. Not everyone can agree on what the problems are, and not everyone has any idea or has any sort of agreement on the solutions that are possible to make it or to help solve some of those problems. The second thing is, or maybe even more importantly, is we don't get any do-overs with wicked problems. So these are problems that you can play the tape forward. For those that remember what a tape is, you can play that tape forward, but you don't get a chance to rewind and play it again. You only get one shot at it. So that's what makes these problems very, very difficult and very, very challenging to solve. So traditionally, what do we do to solve these kinds of problems? So we can use the authoritative method. We can just put someone in charge and get something done, right? It gives power and responsibility to a relatively small handful of people and just drive a solution to completion. There's another way to solve these problems, and that's a competitive way where you have a lot of different solutions out there in the marketplace and they compete against each other. And in the end, the one that is most successful or the one that has the most impact wins. Thirdly, there's a debate opportunity, right? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how to solve this problem in a way that we can work on it together, we can collaborate and try to solve it together. But again, one of the challenges with that possible solution is that you never actually act, right? So we've got three possible ways to solve these problems, but I'm going to propose a fourth way today, right? And the fourth way, it's adapted from the work of Dave Evans and Bill Burnett in a book that they call Designing Your Life. But again, it's a very common process used in design. And the process is simple. It's like planning and designing our own lives. The problems we face with energy in the environment are not ones we can solve easily. Rather, what we can do is focus on getting better by building our way towards a new future iteratively or step by step and learning along the way. Let me just say that again. It's like we're planning our own lives, right? The problems we face with energy and the environment are not ones we can solve easily. But what we can do is focus on getting better by building our way forward iteratively and learning along the way. So, what has ABB done today? So let's talk a little bit about it. So today, in 2014, or back in 2014 rather, we made a pledge to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% before 2020. And this is again versus a 2013 baseline. And what I'm going to talk about today is just one small way and one small action that we took to try to build our way towards that better future. So you see here a picture of a beautiful field of solar cells or solar panels. And what's neat about this is just a few years ago, this was a parking lot. This was a parking lot for one of our manufacturing facilities in Germany. And the beauty of this is we were able to repurpose that space, use the space over the cars, not only shading cars, providing cooling for the cars during the summer, but also providing power for the plant. Now, of course, once you add solar cells or solar panels, you have to add some means to store that energy. So we added battery storage, right? So the battery storage allows us to use off-peak energy and off-peak solar created energy to provide power to the plant. And finally, as a transition to more sustainable transportation, we installed electric vehicle chargers. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can look at the numbers on this slide and you can see that the impact we had for this particular site in the context of the global needs for reducing CO2 emissions was relatively insignificant. However, if you take this, right, this is just one site of hundreds of sites that we have around the globe, and you apply this same technology, you apply this same type of thinking, just think about the opportunity, just think about the savings that we can have, and just think about the potential impact. So the potential impact can be huge. So how did we do? Well, in 2019, we met and exceeded our greenhouse gas emissions target 1 year earlier than we expected. And I'd love to invite you to read a little bit more about that in our sustainability report that just recently came out. So, some thoughts. So where are we going to next, right? So, the renewable energy generation exceeded our expectations. However, what we learned about was that the battery configuration impacts our ability to do peak shaving and smart charging. So we've got to get better at that, right? We've got to improve on that. But we took a step, now we got to take another step. More people, right? This is really interesting to us, is more people, just because we have the charging capability now, are buying, purchasing, and bringing electric cars to work, right? So now we have to decide on how do we allocate that the electric charging infrastructure for people that are coming on a regular basis with newer cars. Again, not something we expected. We didn't expect not something we expected. We did not expect the charging sites to influence people's buying behavior, but it did. And so now we have a problem where there's too many people bringing cars to site, and we need to allocate that charging capability for those cars. So finally, other sites around the world are also trying to implement these solutions, right? And so the challenges are yet to come. The iterations, the designs, the new problems that we're going to have as a result of iterating our way to a better future are yet to come. But we're excited to help not only ABB, right? We're excited not only to help our own company solve these problems, but we're excited to help the world solve these problems. So, 2 key takeaways from these slides and from this conversation. So 1, complex or wicked problems can be solved iteratively or by building our way forward. And we have to learn by trial and error. That's the only way we can solve these complex or wicked problems. And we need to move without waiting for a massive transition, right? That's one of the other takeaways from this. We can't just wait for some massive transition to occur or some situation around us to drive us to change. We have to act, and even small changes can make a big difference in the long term. So I close with this slide. So pictured here is my dad. And this picture reminds me of what my dad taught me growing up. And it's simply this: when you borrow something, you return it in better condition than when you borrowed it. And so that's my challenge to you. So we have an opportunity, and pictured here again is my son and my nephew, the next generation. We have an opportunity to return the world in a better place than when we found it. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be clear. The problems are incredibly difficult to solve. But I believe in what we've demonstrated here with this Mission to Zero effort is that we can solve these problems iteratively. We can solve them with small steps. We can solve them one small problem at a time. So that's my challenge to you. Will you join me in helping making the world better for the generations to come? Thanks so much.